They say some walls are made of bricks, and some are made of silence. In the Soviet Union, silence was thicker than concrete. You didn't speak of freedom. You didn't ask questions. You certainly didn't try to leave. Those who did, if they were ever seen again, returned in stories whispered behind closed curtains, not with voices, but with eyes, hollow, silent eyes. But one man didn't whisper. He built. His name was Valery Mikhailovich, simple name. The kind you find on dusty factory rosters and broken lunchboxes. He was a mechanic by trade, a husband by duty, and a dreamer by disease. Because in that part of the world, dreaming was treated like madness. He worked in aviation repair, not the glamorous kind, with metals and roaring engines. He fixed grounded machines, patched bullet holes in old MiGs, and swept oil from concrete floors. While the world marched under red flags, Valery learned the weight of wings. He studied everything, quietly, secretly. The way some men memorize poetry, he memorized engine layouts and flight surfaces. He watched how metal bent, how air curved around blade tips, how balance could be a form of rebellion. And as others bowed under the weight of the state, Valery began to sketch. At first it was just drawings on scraps. A wing here, a frame there. Little pieces of fiction in graphite. But the drawings kept returning, and slowly they became something else. A plan. He said nothing to his children, not a word to the neighbors, not even to the coworkers he drank with every other weekend. But every night, when the lights in the village flickered off and the dogs stopped barking, he walked into an old wooden barn behind his home and disappeared into the future. The barn was not a place of magic. It leaked, it creaked. The wind slid between the boards and left frost on the workbench. But inside, under candlelight and dust, Valery was turning trash into freedom. He collected junk. Bicycle parts, rusted aluminum, a gas tank from a tractor, car tires, an old motorcycle engine. Nothing matched, nothing fit. But piece by piece, he made them talk to each other. He was building a plane, not a model, not a fantasy, a real flyable life-or-death aircraft with no test run. Only his wife knew. And even she didn't understand. He'd come to bed with oil on his fingers and blueprints in his eyes. Sometimes he would stare at the ceiling and whisper calculations to himself. Other times he would lie there silent, chest rising and falling, like a man listening for the wind outside the walls. She never asked him to stop. Perhaps she knew it was never really a choice. See, Valery wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't seeking glory. He just wanted to breathe. In a country where even the air felt borrowed, he wanted to own a single breath of his own. His target was Finland. Not glamorous. Not far, but reachable. A sliver of legal sky just past the claws of the KGB. If he could get there, if he could cross that invisible line in the trees, then maybe, just maybe, he could land in a world that didn't require permission to dream. It took years. The wings were cut from salvaged aluminum and reinforced with steel rods pulled from collapsed fences. The fuselage was shaped from old sheet metal and bolted together with car parts. The landing gear came from an abandoned cart, the nose cone from a grain silo. He stitched together the wiring using cords meant for radios. Even the propeller was carved by hand. No computers, no CAD design. No weather modeling or airspace clearance. Just intuition and pure old-school engineering driven by desperation. But perhaps the most dangerous part wasn't the building, it was the silence. If a neighbor asked what he was working on, he would smile and say, "An engine for a pump." If the sound of a power tool echoed too long, he would slam the doors shut and wait for the dogs to stop barking. He buried metal parts under haystacks and fake tool chests, burned drawings after memorizing them. He lived like a man already on the run, only his feet hadn't moved yet. By late 1988, the world outside was beginning to fracture. Soviet news started mentioning words like reform and glasnost. But freedom was still theory, not practice. The KGB still watched. Borders still shot first. The world was shifting. But Valery couldn't wait. One morning, he sat at the breakfast table and looked at his children differently. They didn't notice, but his wife did. She saw it in his stillness, in the way his hand shook slightly around his teacup. That night, after dinner, he tucked the children in, as always. He kissed them gently, like it was any other day. But when the house fell silent, he walked out into the dark. The moon was low. The sky was a frozen sheet of black silk. No sound except the creaking of the barn doors and the slow roll of tires over dead grass. The plane looked like a myth, raw, ugly, unpainted, its skin patched with metal scars, its frame shivering with nerves. He climbed in. The engine sputtered, then again, then caught. The barn behind him disappeared into dust. He was flying, above the forests, over snow-choked rivers, through a sky so quiet it felt sacred. He had no altitude readings, no radio contact, no idea if the radar systems had already spotted him. For 2 hours, he flew by feel, by the weight of the wind and the memory of maps. Every vibration in the wing could have been death. Every flicker in the engine could have meant fire. But he kept flying, and then lights. Below him, a village. Quiet, cold, not Soviet. He circled twice, dropped altitude, aimed for a field, and prayed. The landing wasn't graceful. The tires slammed against frozen ground. The nose dipped. Dust exploded. But the plane didn't break. It stopped. He had landed in Finland. The villagers who saw him come down didn't know what to make of it. They rushed out in coats and scarves, eyes wide with confusion. A plane had just landed in their backyard, and out stepped a man soaked in oil and fear, with trembling hands and a 1,000-yard stare. He raised both arms slowly, as if unsure the nightmare was over. One of the farmers asked in broken Russian, "Where? Where are you from?" Valerie's lips cracked into a tired smile. "From behind the sky," he said. By the next day, the world knew. A Soviet mechanic had escaped the Iron Curtain. Not in disguise, not in a truck, not through a smuggler, but in a plane he built in a barn. The newspapers called him the man who flew for freedom. Some called him a hero. Others called him a madman. But his wife, sitting in a kitchen thousands of miles away, just called him Valerie and cried into her tea. The Soviet government said nothing. Perhaps they didn't want to admit what had happened. Or perhaps they were simply too stunned to react. A year later, the Berlin Wall fell. The borders opened. History turned its page. But Valerie had already written his. His plane now hangs in a museum. The metal still bears fingerprints. The bolts still whisper with rust. Children look at it and laugh at how strange it is. But their parents know better. That machine wasn't built for war. It was built for something much rarer. A single, precious breath of freedom. Thank you for watching.